What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, what I want to talk about is some sleepers in your fantasy football drafts as we approach those 2024 drafts. And what a sleeper is, in my opinion, is a player that is being drafted later in your drafts, probably in those double-digit rounds or around that part of the draft, or maybe just players that you don't know too much about right now, but they're in a position to make an impact for your fantasy football roster. So with that being said, I don't want to waste any more time. Let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about my first sleeper. So the first guy up on this list is going to be at the quarterback position, and one guy in particular that I think is going too late in drafts is going to be Matthew Stafford of the Los Angeles Rams. And Stafford has some serious weapons here in Los Angeles, with guys like Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and Kyren Williams, who have all emerged as fantasy football studs. There is no shortage of playmakers here in this Rams offense, and let's not forget, he's got one of the best offensive minds in Sean McVay calling the shots there in LA as well. A lot of people seem to forget about Stafford in drafts this year, maybe just because he's a little bit older, but this Rams offense could still put up a lot of points during the 2024 season. Stafford finished last season on a high note, especially after Kyren Williams returned from an injury in week 12, and the Rams started clicking, averaging about 31 points per game, and Stafford delivered 5 straight top 12 fantasy performances. Stafford was also pretty effective in the red zone last season. He had the 4th most red zone passing attempts with 84, and he turned that into 18 touchdowns, 8th best among quarterbacks. That kind of efficiency is what you want from a fantasy football quarterback, especially if you're snagging him in the later rounds. Another reason to consider Stafford is his schedule to start the season. 3 of his first 4 games are against teams that were some of the easiest matchups for fantasy quarterbacks last year, and that's a great opportunity for him to come out of the gate strong. If you're thinking of waiting on quarterback in your fantasy drafts, Matthew Stafford could be a great option for you. He's got the weapons, the red zone efficiencies, and the easy start to a season from a schedule standpoint, and that could lead to some big early weeks from Matthew Stafford, so don't be surprised if he becomes one of the better late round quarterback options in fantasy this year. Now, the second player I want to talk about as a potential sleeper is going to be Tyjae Spears of the Tennessee Titans. And the Tennessee Titans are going to look a bit different in 2024 with Brian Callahan, the former offensive coordinator of the Cincinnati Bengals, taking over as the new head coach. And this change is pretty intriguing because Callahan has a history of using running backs like Joe Mixon heavily in both the rushing and receiving game, which could mean good things for Tyjae Spears. Tyjae, a former 3rd round pick, was heavily involved last season, playing over 50% of the snaps in 12 out of 17 games alongside Derrick Henry, proving that he was not just a backup. And he caught 50 passes as a rookie, which is impressive and shows he's a key part of their passing game here in Tennessee. With DeAndre Hopkins expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks due to a knee injury early in the year, Spears might even have some more targets coming his way early in the season. Now, Spears is going to be sharing touches with Tony Pollard, which could make this backfield a little bit tricky for fantasy football managers, and we like some of Spears' efficiency numbers, but the Titans offense is a bit of a wild card this year with Will Levis under center. It's going to be pretty hard to predict exactly how things will play out, but one thing that's definitely in Spears' favor is the Titans' schedule. They've got the third easiest projected schedule for running backs in 2024, which should give him plenty of opportunities to produce. Plus, Spears is going a round or 2 later than Pollard in most drafts, making him the more affordable option if you do want to take a shot on one of these Titans running backs. Now, at the start of the season, you can probably look at Tyjae Spears as a high upside flex option, but if Pollard struggles like he did last season, or if he gets hurt, Spears could really take off for fantasy football and deliver massive value at his current ADP. So because of that, if you're looking for a sleeper running back in the later rounds with some potential upside, Tyjae Spears is probably going to be one of your best options. Now, another running back I want to talk about is going to be Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. And we've talked about Chase Brown on a recent video, but I want to mention him again because, as I mentioned, the Cincinnati Bengals are turning the page from longtime starter Joe Mixon, who handled a big chunk of the workload last season, about 67% of the carries and 11% of the targets. And with Mixon gone, there's a big opportunity for the remaining running backs on this roster to step up and take over that massive opportunity share. Chase Brown, a 5th round pick from the 2023 draft, is one guy to keep an eye on, and as a rookie, he started off slow with just 1.7% of the snap share in week 1, but he worked his way up throughout the season, peaking at 28.3% snap share later on in the year, and he's shown he can earn touches and could be in line for more work here during the 2024 season. The Bengals also brought in free agent running back Zach Moss on a 2-year, $8 million deal, and Moss had some fantasy success last year when he was filling in for an injured Jonathan Taylor, but outside of that stretch, he really hasn't been a consistent performer for fantasy football teams. Plus, when you look at his contract, it actually looks a lot like a prove-it deal, and it gives the Bengals the option to move on from him in 2025 with minimal dead cap space if he doesn't perform. Now, this suggests that they're probably not fully committed to him, and they might be looking to see if Chase Brown can step up and win the job here in camp, and we've got some good reviews here in camp of Chase Brown recently. Moss is likely to be used as an early down grinder, while Brown could be more involved in the passing game, and Brown might be the better pick if you play in PPR leagues, especially since he's going almost 2 full rounds later in drafts than Zach Moss. Now, that alone might make him a nice value if you're looking for a later round running back with upside, and we already know that this Bengals offense is projected to be one of the higher scoring units in football this year, and they're also most likely to lean in the passing game a little bit more than they have in years past. So if you're looking for a running back in an ambiguous situation that has some PPR upside and the potential to step into a larger workload as the year goes on, Chase Brown is definitely one of the running backs that is worth that gamble. Now, moving on to the wide receiver position, I want to talk a little bit about Curtis Samuel of the Buffalo Bills, and this wide receiver room in Buffalo is definitely shaping up to be a little bit more of a mystery than we had imagined, but there is a lot of buzz around Keon Coleman, who the Bills grabbed in the second round of the draft. Now, because of that hype, it means you can often snag Curtis Samuel a couple of rounds later than Coleman in your drafts, and he could be a great sleeper pick for your fantasy football teams. Curtis Samuel had a solid season last year, leading the Washington trio in targets per route run, and now he's got a quarterback upgrade and is reuniting with offensive coordinator Joe Brady, who he worked with back in his Carolina days. This change alone could be a big boost for Curtis Samuel. Now, the Bills, they have a huge chunk of their targets from 2023 up for grabs with Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, and other receivers moving on, and Samuel's in line to pick up some of that slack. In fact, he saw more red zone targets last season than some big names like Nico Collins, Drake London, and George Kittle, and with the Bills, I think he could see even more chances to score than he did in 2023. It'll be interesting to see how Samuel fits in with this Bills offense, especially with Dalton Kincaid also getting a lot of the slot work, which is where Samuel usually operates, but still, being a part of one of the league's top offenses means Samuel should have a significant role and could be a sneaky value pick in the later rounds of your drafts. So if you're looking for a late round wide receiver with potential, Curtis Samuel is worth looking at. And with the Bills' offensive shakeup and new opportunity at hand, and Curtis Samuel's recent production, he could be a great sleeper pick that pays off big. Now, another wide receiver I want to look at, we're actually going to look at a rookie. It's going to be Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, the Jaguars wide receiver group is going to look pretty different in 2024, with Calvin Ridley heading to the Tennessee Titans and Zay Jones moving to the Arizona Cardinals. And with those departures, there's about 36% of the targets from last season that are no longer there. Brian Thomas Jr., who was a first-round talent and had an impressive final season at LSU with 17 touchdowns, is set to step into a big role here for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's likely to take on the outside wide receiver spot, and he could become Trevor Lawrence's go-to guy, potentially emerging as the team's top wide receiver. Now, Gabe Davis, he's going to be on the other side of the field, but he's not exactly known for racking up a lot of targets. Christian Kirk and Evan Engram, they will handle most of the short and intermediate routes, but that means that Thomas could see a lot of opportunities for deep shots and big plays. Now, rookies often get overhyped in drafts, but Brian Thomas Jr. seems to be flying under the radar. While players like Ladd McConkey, Keon Coleman, and Xavier Worthy are getting drafted ahead of him, Thomas was actually picked much earlier than them in the NFL draft. He averaged 17.3 yards per reception in his final season at LSU and has the potential to unlock some explosive plays in this offense. And I think he could be a key factor in helping Trevor Lawrence bounce back after a tough 2023 season. So if you're looking for a high upside rookie wide receiver, Brian Thomas Jr. might be the guy to grab, and with a big role and some potential big plays in this Jaguars offense, he could definitely become a steal in your fantasy football drafts. And now the last and final sleeper I want to talk about is going to be at the tight end position. We've talked about him a little bit recently as well, but it's going to be Pat Freiermuth of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, admittedly, I've always been high on Pat Freiermuth ever since I started scouting him for my Dynasty rookie drafts coming out of Penn State, but 2023 was a tough year for him. He only managed to play in 12 games due to a lingering hamstring injury that started in week 4, and he didn't hit 60% of the snaps again until week 14, so it was pretty much a lost season. And the Steelers as a team also had a rough season with an offensive coordinator change from Matt Canada, who admittedly wasn't great, and the rest of the Steelers offense was plagued with inconsistent quarterback play throughout the majority of the year. This also didn't necessarily help Pat Freiermuth's case. But let's not forget, in the 2 years before that, Freiermuth was averaging over 9 fantasy points per game, which put him in the low-end tight end 1 conversation. And with potential upgrades at quarterback this year, whether it's Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, and in an Arthur Smith offense that loves featuring tight ends, I mean, looking at how he used the tight ends in Atlanta, the tight end room accounted for a massive 34% target share last year, which was the highest in the NFL. So these things combined mean that I think Freiermuth could have a bounce back year. Right now, he's pretty much a bargain in drafts, and if he stays healthy and gets some better opportunities, I think he can easily outperform this ADP in 2024. So if you're looking for a late round tight end that is potentially being slept on, Pat Freiermuth might be your guy. And given his past performances and the improvements that are happening around around him, he's a solid pick to make a comeback this year. So there you have it. There's some sleepers for your fantasy football drafts. I know those drafts are approaching very rapidly. We're going to do some busts, some values, everything else in between. Make sure you stay tuned into this channel. But with that being said, I have nothing else for you today. If you did enjoy the video, go ahead and hit that like button. It is the best free way to show this channel some support. Additionally, if you want to catch all of that content that is coming out, it's going to be coming out very rapidly. Make sure you click subscribe and make sure you hit that notification bell. That way you never miss a future video. And last but not least, if you need immediate help for your fantasy football drafts, make sure to go join that Discord. I have a Discord linked in the description. It is free to join. You can go in there, ask me any fantasy football questions you have as those drafts start to pop up, and I'm more than happy to answer those questions for you. So again, with that being said, there is nothing else for you today, so I will see you on our next video. But until then, peace out.